Vanessa, thank you for joining the Lexic Minds podcast. We're looking forward to having a dialogue with you. You are a mom that has two dyslexic boys. You're also an HR leader. So I view this as you wearing more than two hats, right, in your life. We're going to go walk through two of them today and just get your perspective of being a parent and also a HR leader,
Mhm.
and your experience in navigating neurodiversity and supporting individuals. But before we jump on, it'll be great if you could just give us a quick intro about yourself.
Oh, sure. So yes, I'm a parent. I'm a proud mother of two neurodiverse boys. They were both diagnosed with dyslexia. I am also a very proud HR leader. I've been in the HR field for over 25 years, and I thoroughly enjoy this space in helping to drive the people agenda in organizations that I'm a part of.
Excellent. So let's start with the parenting side. And if you could just take us back, right,
Hmm.
early on, what prompted you to get your boys diagnosed,
Yeah.
and see if they were dyslexic?
Yeah. So it actually started with my younger son. His name is Asha. And right when he was about 6 years old and he was entering into primary one here in Singapore, I noticed that he was having some difficulty reading and writing. And at that age, you would expect that a child at that age would roughly be able to at least read some easy books, you know. But he was having some struggles and having some difficulty, although he really enjoyed sitting next to me and listening to me read. But reading himself was challenging. My mom is a former teacher in school, and she mentioned to me, she said, this seems a bit odd and an unexpected difficulty. So why not go get diagnosed? I, of course, shared this with my husband, and he said, he'll be okay. He'll just grow out of it. It's all right. We'll figure it out over time. And so this went on for a few months. And as he was entering into primary one, into the first term, his spelling tests were coming back with less than ideal scores. And he was also taking a much longer time to learn his spellings. And I, of course, had a basis of comparison because I had an older child who was a little bit faster at doing his spelling tests. Um, but at some point in the first term of school, we decided, you know what, let's just go get tested. And then we know what we're dealing with. So I managed to persuade my husband that this very overly anxious mother was going to take our boys, my younger boy actually, to get tested. And we did. We brought him to a clinical psychologist here in Singapore, did a number of tests, and found that he was indeed diagnosed with dyslexia. But the interesting thing was when he was diagnosed, the psychologist also flagged to us that dyslexia is also hereditary and it passes on in families. So she cautioned me to also keep a watch out for my older son. And at that time, we said, you know what? Maybe he's all right. I think he's all right. He got through primary one and primary two. And at that point, my older son is 2 years older than my younger son. And at that point, you know, he seemed to be all right. But as he progressed through the grades, we started to see that my older son started to show signs also of writing difficulties, whether it was punctuation points that were, you know, incorrect, but it was to the extent where no matter how many times you reminded, these were still difficult things for him to be able to do. And spelling got increasingly difficult as well. So then we decided to also send my older son for the test. And true enough, too, his test scores came back as also dyslexic. And so, with that diagnosis, actually, for two of them, we were able to then send them for educational therapy that really focused on helping them to work through some of these difficulties.
And you mentioned, so you're in Singapore. Is the primary medium they're studying in English, or is there another language? And did you
Yeah, so
notice challenges with different languages?
Yeah, so our primary medium of instruction is English, but they also learn Mandarin. So Chinese is a second language for them. Yes, I did find that there was still difficulties when learning Chinese. So there was a need for us to also find techniques for them to be able to cope with a different language.
That makes sense. In terms of the diagnosis itself, the assessment, what do you have any insights as to what was that process like?
Mm. Yeah. So here in Singapore, at least with the clinical psychologist that we went to, um, they had to do a number of assessments. So it was done over a course of, I believe, 2 or 3 sessions, where each session they were given different assessments to do. They were both verbal as well as written. They also had to do some reading exercises. So yeah, it was, and it was also done by different age groups as well. So my older and my younger son had different tests that they went through.
So during that process, do they diagnose only for like a particular type of neurodiversity, for example, dyslexia, or
Mm.
is the outcome of the assessment, is the diagnosis is what how they classify them to be dyslexia or ADHD or some combo of other neurodiversity?
Yeah, so we did an initial discussion with the clinical psychologist to see where we wanted to focus on. And so it was through the interview that we said we thought it was dyslexia, but maybe go test other things as well. And so she did keep a watch out also for ADHD because ADHD and dyslexia are sometimes quite closely linked. So yes, she did keep a lookout for that as well.
So just continuing on that, right? So they were diagnosed, and so they have this outcome now. What tools or ways of coping or ways they navigate, right, this world now? Is there any go-to tips, tricks, or hacks that they have adopted?
Yes, there are some learning techniques that they have picked up over time. So we do send both boys for therapy. And through their therapy, in fact, the therapist teaches them some techniques using the Orthon-Gillingham method. The therapist actually teaches them different ways in which they're able to read, to recognize how different words are formed and read, and yeah, I think that has probably been the most effective tool for them, if you would. And they do learn different tips and tricks and how to quickly interpret words. And so she also gives them various tools in class where they also learn how to remember, how to construct a sentence, how to break it up into smaller chunks. So yeah, I think that has been probably the most effective way of learning for them.
So let's talk about the opposite of that, right? So when we talk to other parents and even adults, not all techniques have been effective
Mm.
for the children or for even adults. I'm just curious to see if you have tried other techniques and that hasn't really helped your kids.
Well, when we first learned of the diagnosis, we did try different things. So, um, I mean, there are a number of different tools that are out there. One of them is the colored overlays. We purchased a few of those on Amazon. We gave it a try at home. I think these tools all work to different levels and may be appropriate for different individuals. Those didn't quite work for us, but I think it might work for others. I think my advice to people will be, give all of these tools a try and see which one fits your child the best.
Speaking of advice, Vanessa, there are parents who are in the questioning stage, right? Or the unsure, the stage of, hey, is
Mm,
my child dyslexic or do they have any form of neurodiversity, right? And
mm,
then there are
mm,
folks that are in different stages. I'm just
mm,
curious for folks who are in that early stage who
mm.
haven't taken the next step, what advice would you have for them?
I always think that parents, we kind of know it in our gut. I think first and foremost, take a deep breath and know that dyslexia is not a barrier to success. I think that sometimes we fear that for our children, and we fear that actually of ourselves. But just recognize that dyslexia is something that can be turned into a superpower. And your child has unique strengths and abilities that will shine through, but with the right level of support. So when I speak with friends and with other people who've asked me about this, I always share, take that first step. And early intervention and good level of understanding is key. As a parent, you're closest to your child. So be observant to the learning needs of your child. And if you sense that they're having this unexpected difficulty in reading and writing, and especially once they have started formal education in primary school and grade school, you'll have an even closer ability to be able to observe. So if you have any fear of this at all, I'll just say to parents, get the diagnosis. The diagnosis in a way empowers you as a parent to understand what you're dealing with. Before my husband and I sent our kids for diagnosis, we used to argue over how much time we would take and who should be the one helping our children to do the reading for that day. And we would get frustrated because they were not able to read the whole passage when we thought that they should. But with the diagnosis, it empowered us with the knowledge and understanding of how we could deal with it, how we could help our kids, and actually also to help ourselves as parents understand this better. And so I think that that's crucial. That's crucial, and it enables us also to have the right vocabulary when speaking with our kids as well. We understand how we should go about celebrating their strengths and their achievements. And I think that's really important. The vocabulary and the words that we say to our children can be very empowering. So ensuring that we have the right state of mind as parents can be very helpful through getting that diagnosis.
Well said. Good advice. And something that I think we all need to just take a step back, look beyond the stigma, and just be an advocate for your child, right? And if your
Yeah.
gut says, go get the assessment, get it tested out, and then, you'll know what to do, right? And there's so many resources out there. You mentioned dyslexia being a superpower and all. I'm just curious from your child, right? Talking to other parents, some of them said the kids they're able to communicate better, although reading and writing might be challenging, but their verbal has been good, and they're able to articulate well. I'm
Yeah.
just curious from both your boys, what are some of the things that you think charges them, right, or implies because of dyslexia?
I choose to reframe, and I choose to see some of the incredible strengths that they bring to the table. My boys have an incredible ability to think outside the box, but they're both different. So my older son is an incredible athlete. He is able to perform at swimming, at any sports that he picks up, be it volleyball at school or swimming or jujitsu. He's incredibly talented when it comes to picking up these skills, sports. He's a natural. And so I think these are some of the skills that we look at appreciating. My younger son, also with dyslexia, is very verbal. He is always very creative with what he's thinking. He's always the first one to crack a joke, but he's also extremely empathetic. He understands and is able to read the room quite intuitively. He knows when people are upset and how he needs to be situationally aware. And at that age, it's quite incredible. And dyslexia, it's on a spectrum as well. There are different levels of severity or different levels of learning needs. So be aware of how it manifests and how it presents. And, each child has different learning needs, even though it's all, the same diagnosis, dyslexia, but you gotta be able to flex to their strengths.
And also they're two boys, so I'm pretty sure they're they're like running around the house and causing some chaos too. But I'm glad their strengths and their personalities are like coming out here.
Yeah.
So good. So let's switch to the other hat now, right? The human
Yeah.
resource leader, right? From the parent. You've been in the industry. You've been you're a leader in the industry. I'm curious. I'll start off with a general question around the landscape around support and resources for, in this case, adults that are neurodiverse, right? How they could navigate in the workplace to get the right accommodation. Any general thoughts on advice would be very helpful.
I agree with you that this topic of neurodiversity in the workplace, and I'll speak for Singapore, it is still a relatively new topic at the workplace. I think that many of the challenges that workplaces face today is the lack of understanding or even a misunderstanding and lack of awareness of what dyslexia is. Dyslexic individuals, while they may struggle with reading or writing or sometimes time management as well, and sometimes it can be misconstrued as a lack of ability or being lazy or being super disorganized. And additionally, some of our traditional work environments rely very heavily on certain skills and reward those skills in order to be successful without necessarily providing some of those accommodations. And that could lead to quite a challenging work environment. On the topic of what can workplaces do, I think first it's understanding neurodiversity presents itself in different ways. And as organizations, we can understand how we can be a more inclusive environment by providing certain accommodations for individuals who might need them, individuals who might have dyslexia or other neurodiversity. For individuals who have dyslexia, like my two boys, I do think about the future workplace for both of them too. Will these workplaces have flexible work arrangements? Will these workplaces also have digital tools that will enable them to be able to manage calendaring and some of this time management tools, or even AI tools that can help with speech to writing conversions? And today with AI and with even ChatGPT, these are wonderful tools that when it's made widely available in workplaces, which it is today, can really help individuals.
That's perfect. And I think that's going to go a long way. Me thinking about my kids too, that's one of those things that it's on top of mind too, right? Like what are some of the things that, to be honest, what I could influence right now to help them, right? So I think that's good advice. In Singapore, have you seen companies do any training or awareness sessions to just get the workforce more understanding about, hey, this is how neurodiversity is and individuals, how to navigate. And I guess part two of that question would be especially for people managers, right?
Yeah.
Has there been any training or any sort of support provided?
Yeah.
Or do you see that being an opportunity?
I do see it as an opportunity. I think depending on organizations, some are more advanced than others. Some have gone a longer way in terms of building awareness and building workplaces that are inclusive and that accommodate for neurodiverse individuals. So it is happening. It's happening, though, at varying rates across the industry. I think that the best-in-class organizations are those who have not only built a strong level of awareness, understanding through training, advocacy from leadership, but have also been those organizations that have also designed workplaces that are inclusive and accommodating to some of these needs. So making accommodations around, for example, allowing for more time for perhaps certain tasks to be completed, or allowing for some of these AI tools to be used in order to help individuals be able to be more efficient and more effective. I think manager education is also super important. And back to your question, are organizations doing this? Yes, I think that organizations are increasingly learning to do more of this, although not all are. But I think the best-in-class organizations are also those who invest in manager education. How do managers really go about empowering individuals like these neurodiverse individuals to capitalize on their strengths? For dyslexic individuals, put them in roles where they are able to perhaps connect the dots very well in a strategic or in an innovative way, because dyslexic individuals are able to, in many ways, connect these dots, perhaps when neurotypical individuals may take a longer time. But they see some of these patterns intuitively. Give those individuals that kind of project that they can work on. Give them the opportunity where their strengths can come to life, rather than to put them into roles where they're not necessarily able to demonstrate those strengths. So I would say it takes a very observant, very intuitive manager who understands how to leverage on the strengths of individuals. And I think regardless of diversity, this is the kind of manager training that all organizations should invest in.
Yep, I completely agree. Me being in, the corporate setting and being an executive myself, one of the things I've noticed was, and always questioned myself was, okay, how do we provide the right training and awareness? But going a step further to say, okay, how can I put a neurotypical individual in someone else's shoes, right? So walk the
Yeah.
walk. And one thing that I could draw a parallel is we worked in the senior sector, right? So Medicare, 65 and above individuals. And part of one company is part of their onboarding process. They go through this training where they blur the screens or make the fonts difficult so that you see from a user experience from a customer support perspective how you need to modify, right, to support the end user or the customer they're serving, right? It's almost like it'll be good to have some trainings that are very practical or hands-on that shows, okay, this is the world of a person that's, let's say I'm dyslexic. So someone who's dyslexic, right? If you give a paragraph or two and say, okay, read this, you're not going to read that. You'll need a day to read it. Or sometimes the words look jumbled. So it'll be good to just provide a little bit more hands-on experience. So that's I think a really good opportunity out there in the market.
These days there's also increasing number of technology tools that can help us. So assistive technology like text-to-speech software and speech-to-text tools. These are all really helpful tools, I think, that will help to make the workplace even more inclusive for neurodiverse individuals. Neurodiverse individuals and dyslexics in particular, because my boys are dyslexic, to be advocates for themselves too. So we communicated quite early on to my two boys that their diagnosis, and we shared it with them. And it was on the advice of my therapist that we plucked up the courage to share with them, because I wasn't sure how, young children might take the diagnosis and how should I communicate. So we watched a few videos around how to communicate this with our kids, but eventually we took the plunge and we shared it with them because we wanted them to understand what their diagnosis meant. What did it mean to be a dyslexic? So that they are then able to advocate for themselves. And this is really important, that they understand the vocabulary, they understand how to ask for extra time when they need to, how to raise their hand in class when they are having difficulty understanding what's written on the board. And I think it's also really important, as and being an advocate for yourself is applicable in school, but it becomes even more important than at the workplace, because dyslexics have to be able to effectively communicate to their managers and to the people around in an effective way. Of course, it's never used an excuse. It's not an excuse, but it's shared so that you can be an advocate for yourself, for the tools that you might need, for the type of work arrangement that you might need. And so I encourage this. I'm a huge proponent of being an advocate for yourself, but as a parent too, being an advocate for my child.
Well said, well said. And I think the other part, talking to other parents in this podcast, one of the things that I'm also realizing, and they've said, is, up until your high schooling here in US, right? Up until the high schooling, you have your special education plan, IEP, and a 504 plan, but you have your advocates, your parents, and your school system supporting you. But when you transition to college and then your workplace, you're on your own, right? And you have to be your best advocates there, right? Even in college, there are resources out there, but you have to find them. It's not proactively coming to you, right? And then you have to navigate the world. So I think you're spot on, like teaching your boys early on to be advocates and be their primary advocates is going to be helpful in college and beyond, and just help navigate and spread the word. More importantly, also be a champion and be part of removing that stigma that's out there, right?
Yes,
And I think that's
absolutely.
important. Yeah. All right. So a few more questions for you. When you're looking at the market again, wearing your hat as a HR leader, what opportunities do you see, or what are some of the um, what's lacking in the market right now that you think would benefit neurodiverse employees?
I think that there is certainly a need for more widespread awareness and training for managers and teams to really understand dyslexia and other neurodiverse conditions. I think that the market has an opportunity to have comprehensive tools that are easily available and adaptable for different work environments, and for managers to understand too how to leverage on these to help your employees. I think that there's a great need for companies, managers to advocate for inclusive culture where neurodiverse employees can feel valued and understood, environments that understand how to really bring out the strengths in every one of our employees. So I think that there's still that ongoing education, training, and leadership advocacy that's required in workplaces.
I agree. And I think that's one of those things that needs to be part of onboarding process. And then, similar to companies that go through compliance training and other sort of
Yeah.
training, right? If there's
Yeah.
a refresher, and as I mentioned, like hands-on opportunities where you walk the walk, right? Put
Yeah.
yourself in another person's shoe and see how that goes. I think it'll make it more relatable, and go from some sort of a concept to more practical, right?
Yes.
And I think we need to bridge that the gap there. We talked about being a parent, being a HR leader, and I have to say, you and your husband has been, just listening to you talk and all the things that you've done, have been good advocates for your kids, and I think they have a really good support system. I'm glad to see that, and also you being an HR leader, having some kids, your kids and your personal life to relate to. I think you'll be you're a more empathetic leader and an advocate for neurodiversity. So I'm glad to see that as well. Just curious, do you have any parting thoughts before we wrap up our conversation? Any advice to parents or even other HR executives, right? As they're navigating this world.
I think to parents, I would say early diagnosis can make all the difference. Don't be afraid. Embrace the strengths that your children have. And you'll be amazed with how this can truly be that superpower once we understand how to harness that in our children. You'll be amazed at what they're able to bring to the table. You'll also be amazed with how it transforms you as a parent to make you so much more empathetic. You learn to adjust your way of parenting. And I think our children have so much to teach us. Organizations, I would say, as organizations, as leaders, we have a responsibility to our employees, to the workplace, to build a space that's inclusive for everyone. And it does take extra effort to make sure that we are making the right accommodations, but it takes even more effort on the part of leaders and managers to be able to understand, observe, and to work closely with all of your employees, neurotypical or neurodiverse, because each one brings to the table such unique strengths. But being an observant and being an involved manager means that you are also taking charge of the way you go about developing your team. And neurodiverse individuals have so much that they can bring to the table, so long as we're able to look beyond the surface and kind of peel that onion open. You'll find that there's so much that neurodiverse and dyslexic individuals are able to bring to the table.
Well said, Vanessa. And thank you for being on this podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm pretty sure our community does as well. So thank you.
Thank you.